Tonight, don't frustrate the will of the people. The Prime Minister's warning to the House of Lords not to delay his Rwanda bill. But with the threat of the measures being bogged down for months, can Rishi Sunak get his plan and a plane to Rwanda off the ground before the general election? After the backbench rebellion melted away last night, we'll speak to one of the Conservative deputy chairmen who resigned from his post to support the rebels, only to back the bill last night. Tata Steel is expected to confirm the loss of 3,000 jobs at its plant in South Wales. The unions call on the government to act. The Chancellor tells us he'll do everything he can to help those affected. Calls for HMRC to act after tens of thousands of people across the UK were left living in fear of bankruptcy after joining a workplace scheme. We speak to one of those affected. And as a former minister is accused of a geography fail on Rwanda, we look at other times politicians have lost their bearings. All that and more with Nick Ferrari and Gina Miller, who will be with us for the next hour. It's Thursday, I'm Sophy Ridge, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. So, Rishi Sunak has done it. Despite the doubters, the Rwanda bill has cleared the House of Commons, with only 11 Conservatives voting against it. And this means that he is that much closer to putting his flagship immigration policy in action to try and deter asylum seekers from crossing the Channel by putting them on a plane to Rwanda. So on paper, a great week for the Prime Minister. But of course, this parliamentary battle isn't over yet, with the House of Lords already arming up. And this morning, Rishi Sunak was combative, telling the Lords not to block the will of the people. The will of the people. I've heard that one before. A firm favourite of the Brexit wars, we can now add the Lords to the list of those shadowy figures trying to block the will of the people. Judges, the Labour Party, Gina Miller, who's on our panel tonight. It's been a trusted tactic of Conservative Prime Ministers to blame vested interests, the establishment, the elite, for frustrating what they consider to be the will of the people. And, by the way, I'm not saying there's never any truth in that, or that there isn't an establishment that has too often been skewed towards one liberal metropolitan viewpoint. But the point I'm trying to make is this. It's helpful for Rishi Sunak to find a new enemy to blame, because there's one thing that I do know. The Prime Minister promised to stop the boats, not to stop some of the boats or to reduce the number of boats. He promised to stop the boats, and that is impossible. Even if, as seems vanishingly unlikely, flights to Rwanda take off this spring, as he once promised, he chose to put stopping the boats front and centre of his premiership and his offer to the British people. So if he fails to do that, well, he better have a decent excuse lined up. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates.
After a bruising 2 days, the Prime Minister wanting to get the country and his party back on side.
The plan is working, but we've got to stick to the plan, stick to the plan, stick to this plan, stick to the plan. The plan is working, right?
Another Downing Street press conference about Rwanda, but despite winning last night's vote, unable to promise flights would take off this side of an election.
I want to see this happen as soon as practically possible. We're working as fast and as quickly as we can, and the question really is for the House of Lords. Right? And that's the question.
This is the moment the bill arrived from the Commons into the Lords. Opposition easy to spot. Some of the Lords' biggest legal brains unimpressed with the Prime Minister's pleading.
I was astonished by the press conference he gave. It was repetitive, it was banal, it said nothing new. I just don't understand the point of having it. It will have disappointed everybody. The House of Lords will not be influenced by a 2-minute, 37-second press conference. This is an Orwellian moment in our politics, and we should be very careful before we accept it.
With the Rwanda bill heading to the Lords in a fortnight, we had the bizarre spectacle of the Prime Minister summoning cameras to Downing Street to plead with peers to back the Rwanda bill on behalf of the people. He could have used today to change the subject to a more optimistic message for election year, but instead he highlighted his powerlessness. The Prime Minister survived one key vote this week, but if the bill is killed by peers, his party fear that also could be deadly.
We're going to have to take that if it happens. My message to the Lords right now is look at how serious this issue is.
But by implication, what you're saying is, if the Lords kill the bill, maybe they're ending Rishi Sunak's premiership as well.
It
is a risk.
It is a risk. A week is a long time in politics. I think it'll be down that end for a couple of months.
This, the price of political failure. 5 migrants have lost their lives just this week. Migrant crossings up 4-fold this year. The Prime Minister doubling down all this week on his trickiest issue, a tough stance on immigration now tied to his electoral fortunes. Will it pay off? Sam Coates, Sky News.
We'll talk to Sam in a minute. And as we were just saying, the division over the Rwanda bill saw the Conservative Party lose 2 deputy chairs on Tuesday after they joined the rebels in supporting amendments to the legislation. And one of them, Brendan Clarke-Smith, joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. So on Tuesday you resigned so you could vote for a rebel amendment on the Rwanda bill. And then on Wednesday you voted for the bill at third reading. So just to get this straight, you voted to try and change the bill, but then that's why you resigned, but then you voted for it anyway. So what's going on?
I'd say the point behind this is, Sophie, that the Conservative Party, what you'll see, whichever wing people are on or whichever group people are in or supposedly in, we all want to see this legislation work. We want to see the planes taking off and we want to see this Rwanda plan actually followed. So the only debate really between that, probably 90-odd% of that bill people are happy with. It's the last part of it really where we just want to make sure it's watertight. So we've had 2 pieces of legislation already. Many of us have called for these various changes before, and we've said that we think the best chance of the policy succeeding would have been with those amendments. So we voted for those amendments. It's not a binary thing like with Brexit, where you wanted to leave or you wanted to stay in as such. We all actually want the bill to succeed and to work. So really, it's just a difference of opinion on how that is. So I think throwing the baby out of the bathwater and taking the whole bill down, a lot of us didn't want to do that. And I'll be very, very happy if I'm proved wrong and this bill goes through and we do get those planes off the tarmac.
Can you see, though, why some people watching this might feel that, they've been marched up the hill and then marched all the way back down again? Does it look a bit ridiculous to, resign to vote in favour of a rebel amendment and then to vote for the bill the next day?
Well, obviously, we were hoping that the government would take on board the amendment. The difficulty is if I was a backbencher, then I have slightly different options with it. But once you're on the payroll, as we know with collective responsibility, if you vote for something against the government or you try and change things, then you're expected to resign. And if you don't resign, of course, the likelihood is that you're going to be sacked for that. So we knew the rules. We knew how it worked, but we decided it was so important to us that it was worth pushing for that. So in the end, we offered to resign because we wanted to vote for those amendments. The Prime Minister accepted it. But then, of course, I've decided afterwards that, well, the actual legislation itself, we still want it to work. We still want it to go through the Lords, and we want the Rwanda plan to progress, really. We don't want to stop it entirely.
You say we, because you did resign alongside Lee Anderson, the other deputy chair. Now, in an interview, he said that he was going to vote against the bill, but then all the Labour MPs in the division lobby started laughing at him, so he walked back out again. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, Lee's very passionate about this, the same as me, and I think what you will see is
not passionate enough to vote the way he wanted to, because he got laughed at.
Well, it is a tough decision whether you abstain or whether you vote against or not. It is quite a powerful thing. You're walking through a lobby with people that you've campaigned against, who you've seen got no interest at all in stopping illegal migration, and voted 70-odd plus times against every measure that we've actually gotten, and people do change their minds with that, and people voted 3 different ways for a variety of reasons. The vast majority of the parliamentary party did vote for it, so a majority of 44, so goes to the Lords with a clear message there. But as Lee said, he wants this legislation to work as well.
You tweeted to try and explain, some of your thinking and why you resigned, and you said it wasn't an easy decision and one that took a great deal of soul searching. So I just wondered, what was it you were wrestling with? What were your fears?
I think the problem is, and I represent what you'd call a red wall seat, so to speak, immigration is a really, really big issue, and it's that sense of fairness. So we had lots of people voted for Brexit, voted to leave the EU, but taking back control was about far more than just leaving the EU. It's about our policing, it's about our courts, it's about how we deal with things as a country, really. And people want to see fairness return. They having to work very hard at the moment with the cost of living. They don't want to see the pressure put on housing, the pressure put on GPs, the pressure put on school places, really. So for many of us, we see this very much as an existential threat, really. We've got to tackle illegal migration. We've got to tackle legal migration as well, which is also too high. And getting this bill through now, it's not the only step, but we've had returns.
What you mean by existential threat? Existential threat to who?
I think many MPs, such as myself, we want to do what it says on the tin. We want to show our constituents that we're actually making their lives better, that we're actually running the country in the way that they want it to, and they want to see results, and that's perfectly understandable. And when it's as big an issue,
and if not, then you'll lose your seat. So that's what you mean, is it, basically?
Yeah, I mean, we go into politics because we want to change things. So, I don't think our jobs are quite as important as the fact that we've got a country that actually works and is a great place to live, as it still is. But at the same time, the public expect results. Now, we're the only people who are actually trying to do something about this. It's a challenge not just for us, it's a challenge all over Europe, it's a challenge in the United States. So in terms of migration, this is a global problem. You're seeing movements against this everywhere at the moment. But we've got in there, we've had quite an innovative scheme, we've had the returns with Albania, which we're doing really well with, and a few other things. But this Rwanda scheme, we think, could be a really good deterrent. So that's why it's so important. That's why we've been so passionate about it and had all those debates in the last few days. And as I said, the soul searching I had, I've been a party member for 25 years, and I was very, very proud to become a deputy chairman. Relatively short period of time that I've done it, because I decided that, on principle, I've been saying for a long time, I've done media interviews, I've written pieces, I've voted for things, I've signed amendments for all of this kind of stuff. So I just thought, in terms of consistency and being honest to myself and true to myself and really the people I represent, that I had to resign to vote for those amendments.
A couple of questions to squeeze in, if I can. If the House of Lords does try to change this legislation, try and block it even, would they be frustrating the will of the people?
Well, I'd say if you don't want to stop illegal migration, then you're absolutely frustrating the will of the people. Now, whether that's people in the Commons doing it, in the Lords doing it, in the courts doing it.
They might just have a problem with this bill. They might not think it's fair. They might not think it's going to work. They might have genuinely held concerns.
Well, they're doing their jobs, and I respect that. And they'll want to look at it. They'll want to debate it the same as we do. And I wouldn't want to stop the Lords from doing that. They're not just there to rubber stamp things. They are there to actually scrutinise and to suggest things. But really, they also need to see the strength of feeling from the public. Say we got it through with a decent majority in the Commons as well. What we don't want to see is people deliberately delaying it and kicking it into touch, really. I mean, this is a serious issue that needs dealing with now. We want to get those flights off. People are asking about whether they're going to go off in the spring. So the Prime Minister can't answer that for definite because we don't know what the Lords are going to do. So what I'd say to the Lords, I've spoken to a lot of them as well, and a lot of Conservative peers. They feel as passionate as we do. They want to help us get this through as well. So I'd urge those other Lords as well, just maybe knock on a few doors where you live, see what people think, ask what they think, because the people where I live, certainly in my constituency, they want this to be passed and they want us to deal with illegal migration properly. And that's what the bill will do.
One last question for you, because I think some people think maybe the reason that the rebellion crumbled away is because Conservatives don't want to accidentally fall into an early election. And looking at some of these polls, you can see why. I mean, the latest YouGov survey for The Times had the Conservatives on 20%. I mean, John Major didn't even poll as low as 20% in the year before the 1997 landslide. What's your majority in Bassetlaw again?
Well, my majority is 14,000. I've got a bit of a boundary change as well in there. But I think we've seen, it doesn't really matter what your majority is, and you should never really take your constituency for granted. I certainly don't take mine for granted. You consider all sorts of things. The same with us. If it had been defeated yesterday, there's the prospect that we'd have no Rwanda bill at all, which would be the worst option of all. So I think we've got to consider those things. So when you're looking at numbers and you're looking at decisions and you're looking at how people are voting, a lot of colleagues actually thought of those things as well. So there's a lot of factors in all of these decisions, but the one main thing is that we all want to get a piece of legislation that works. And as I say, if this unamended bill, which actually went through in the end, which I voted for, if that actually proves to be successful, I'd be delighted that I've been proved wrong on the amendments, and I think we'll all be happy.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you on the Politics Hub this evening,
Thanks,
Brendan Clarke-Smith there. Well, we're joined now by our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. Sam, what's your reaction to the interview, first of all?
It was interesting to hear at the end Brendan Clarke-Smith acknowledging that actually politics, electoral politics, the fact that the Conservatives could get into an even worse political situation, played a role in his decision to be a rebel, resign, and then vote for the very bill that he'd been opposing parts of in the hours before. So there you've got it. I mean, you've got the reasoning. But I think for the sake of viewers at home, I think a bit of that interview needs unpicking, because on Tuesday and Wednesday, viewers will have seen 65 to 70 MPs, Tory MPs, directly defying Rishi Sunak, and then actually many of them changing their mind on Wednesday evening. And now every Tory MP that you come out and listen to says, aren't we all united? We all agree. Slight disagreement on the means. And they are very skillfully reframing it. But let me play the same trick back at them. It is true that actually pretty much every MP wants the kind of Rwanda policy to work, and there's just a disagreement over how. But actually the disagreement over how is fundamental. There is a minority, it's a big minority, 65 to 70, Tory MPs who want to have another great big institutional battle. That's about leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, and the rest don't, because they see risks. They think it's bad for Britain's reputation. It would put some of the agreements that we've done with the EU at risk. I think Rishi Sunak is in that camp, and they very clearly don't want to do that. That is an unbridgeable chasm, and that's where the party is at the moment.
And Sam, your thoughts on Rishi Sunak's news conference this morning as well? Because, I think that expression perhaps, when that phrase, picture says a million words, I think that's the... what did you make of it?
Well, you talked at the beginning about he needs to find a new enemy. I mean, it's quite late on in the political cycle to be finding new enemies. I watched a Prime Minister summon the TV cameras, stand before the Downing Street podium and basically appeal to peers to do what he wanted. And that's a very weird thing to watch. I mean, the peers they've only barely received the bill, and there he is begging them. I thought it underlined the fact that he hadn't solved the issue of small boats. It underlined the fact that he is to a certain degree powerless. It's in the hands of these peers now what happens. And there he is, Prime Minister, theoretically the kind of top of our political tree, begging this bunch of people to come to his aid, even though they might not agree it, because it was the will of the people, something that he asserts, and viewers have to decide whether or not they think that's right. And here we are on day sort of 4 this week of him talking about how he hasn't been able to do what he says he wants to do with Rwanda. And I don't know whether we can have a look at this poll that's sitting on my right, but we got this extraordinary poll from YouGov today. And it's the 27-point lead for Labour, which is enormous. That's the lowest figure for the Conservatives since Liz Truss. But that's the figure I want you to find. So this is Reform UK. So this is the party to the right of the Conservatives. That's its highest ever figure. And that's what happens, I think, when you talk about boats, but you don't solve boats. People don't necessarily flock to the Conservative Party. They flock to the people that they think might be tougher, and that might be the answer.
So interesting, Sam. That poll really is absolutely astonishing. And obviously, just one poll, but there's a trend. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates there, our Deputy Political Editor. Now, I want to bring our panel in just a moment. But first, modern politics is all about messaging. So let's just savour something that we picked up in Rishi Sunak's news conference today. See if you can spot it.
The plan is working, but we've got to stick to the plan so that we can finish the job. And if we stick to the plan, we can deliver that positive change. I want to stick to the plan. That plan is working, as I've demonstrated. And if we stick to the plan, we'll be able to deliver the change that people want. The plan is working, right? Across the board, you can see that progress is being made, and our job is to stick to that plan. And that plan is working. We are making progress, and that's why it's so important we stick to this plan. Plan is working, but we've got to stick to the plan so that we can finish the job, and that's what we're going to do.
The Prime Minister's going to stick to the plan. Right, let's bring in our duo for the night, shall we? The broadcaster, Nick Ferrari, and the leader of the True and Fair Party and veteran of legal battles against Brexit, Gina Miller. Are you getting kind of deja vu at all?
This is just constitutional sabotage, this whole bill. I mean, I cannot remember in politics any time when so much political capital and money and time and effort is being invested in something that is a waste of time, basically. I mean, and also the political naivety to have said that one of the things you were going to do is stop the boats when you couldn't possibly deliver on it. I just think this is a Prime Minister who is so out of his depth that press conference today showed somebody who's really exhausted, tired. Plan? He can't even get a sentence out, much less a plan out. I mean, it is extraordinary to me that they're in this position. It's all of their making. This is the thing, it's of their own making. He didn't have to go down this silo. And now, as you said earlier, he's pleading to the peers to come to his rescue. I mean, I don't think they can go anywhere other than into a breakdown, a nervous breakdown. And that's where the Conservative Party are on this, because even though it got through, the House of Lords are not going to make it any, they really can't amend it to a form that would come back and it would go through, I don't think, in a way that satisfies the courts and actually satisfies or stops any legal challenges. Because what they're trying to do is basically create a law to outlaw other laws.
OK. Well, there you go. I think some people might say that maybe it's a good week for the Prime Minister. He's managed to get the legislation through. He's trying to tackle an issue that voters care about. What's your view, Nick?
I like Gina, but I didn't know that we had Mystic Miller in the studio, because Gina has just told us that the policy can never work. How do we know until we try? Now, by the way, I have huge reservations, but it is worth saying, if you look at the Italian project with Lampedusa and you look at the Australian project with Papua New Guinea and Nera and other countries, they have worked. Now, I'm not pretending for one moment this hasn't been clumsily introduced. I think if we hold on to a couple of numbers, 642 and 240 million. Why do I ask you to hold on to those numbers, Sophie? Because this began 642 days ago, I think 4 prime ministers ago, 5 home secretaries ago, 2 of whom, by the way, were Suella Braverman. This is how long ago. I know. And 240 million is the amount of money in pounds that we have spent. But respectfully,
about 400 million.
I hear what you say, but until we... And I agree, it's been appallingly introduced and prosecuted. Until we try it, Gina, you don't know it's not going to work.
Well,
that's absurd.
Well, no. What this bill is trying to say is trying to make Rwanda a safe country, and I just can't see how you can make a legislation to make something that's not true.
Because the British courts have said it's so. Now, the European courts have a different view. I accept all of that, but we do need some kind of model, don't we? Because the government would point to the success they've enjoyed with the Albanian.
We need a solution, but that solution is about a pan-European agreement that looks at first country, looks at where we get to. That is where the time and effort should be spent, because this issue is not going away.
No.
It's going to get worse and worse.
Yes.
So we need to find a solution that's in conjunction and collaboration with Europe. Trying to make it about Rwanda, it just seems to me is for the birds.
In all honesty, what do you think is the likelihood of cooperation between the United Kingdom and Europe, given that the French could be seen to be rather reluctant to play their part in this?
Well,
the idea of cooperation, again, is a lovely idea, but even you,
they have said
Miller,
they want to,
will accept that it ain't going to happen.
Look, you know, it was interesting listening to Brendan talk about his constituency. People who understand, and everybody wants the issue of migration addressed. Of course they do. But people now look at that 400 million figure that's coming up on the horizon saying, why is that money not being spent on legal routes, on better agreements with France and other countries, not just France, but first countries.
Stop the crossings, Gina.
It will, and then also looking at the gangs, because this bill is not going to tackle the illegal gangs, is it? It's not going to stop the traffickers.
Well,
nothing in the Rwanda bill.
If you stop the boats, you stop the gangs, no?
Right, it's not going to stop it. It's a deterrent. They said it's a deterrent.
Before we move on, both of you, chances of a flight. Chances of a boat are pretty high. Chances of a flight taking off to Rwanda before the next election. Where would you put the percentage chance?
I think if the election is before summer, absolutely no chance at all. If it's in November, as people are saying, there might be a flight that takes off, but that's not going to solve the issue.
Nick, what do you reckon?
You've got a bet with him, haven't you?
I tried to take a bet. They won't take my money anymore, unfortunately. Having lost the last bet I did on this show, I think Gina's right. If it's November, we might get a flight off. It will probably have a lot of journalists and about 2 unfortunate souls who might not come back, but hopefully the journalists will.
You can see the kind of live
absolutely,
of the plane. Thank you both very much indeed. Lively discussion there. And the ongoing debate over migration that we've just seen is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Daily Express columnist and broadcaster Carol Malone and the editor of The Courier in Dundee, David Clegg. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up, we ask the Chancellor whether he supports Tata Steel's expected decision to axe 3,000 jobs at the country's biggest steelworks.
I'm Helen Ann Smith. I'm Sky's Asia correspondent, and I'm based here in Beijing. My most memorable story was covering the extreme zero COVID restrictions.
A massive COVID wave is sweeping this city, but officially, almost no one has died.
This is a 4-lane dual carriageway, completely shut off. Some things are being allowed in, but actually the only thing we've seen coming out is an ambulance. The message from China is clear. This is a modernised military, absolutely able to fight an international war if needed. Is this military ready?
We are prepared to face every kind of challenge.
My biggest challenge is adequately telling the stories of the Chinese people, even when the authorities would prefer me not to.
Hey.
By the rules, we are allowed to film in the streets.
To the left.
I will always remember the atmosphere at the Shanghai protests. It was an electric mix of excitement, fear, and defiance, and a sense that history was being made. It's hard to express just how incredibly unusual these scenes are in China.
There are people who are afraid.
On the streets of Xinjiang, there is still a tension. Heavy police, a sense they're always watching.
It's really an incredible eeriness to this place, and it just is completely abandoned. The Chinese housing market, for so long a driver of growth, is now a real liability. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's actually hard to describe the cold here. It's so intense. It literally takes your breath away.
I can't tell if I'm moving it or it's moving me, but it's a very strange feeling.
The world is watching what's happening here.
Hello, welcome back. Now, it's understood that Tata Steel is to go ahead with plans to close both blast furnaces at its plant in Port Talbot in South Wales. The move is expected to lead to the loss of 3,000 jobs. Our economics editor Ed Conway asked the Chancellor about the expected announcement.
Do you back them, whatever decision they make, or do you have some kind of reservations about whether they should be, picking a kind of a newer, more exciting technology, trying to get fewer job cuts there?
Well, we have an agreement with them, and I'm sure they're going to honour that agreement. And provided they honour that agreement, then of course we'll be supportive. But the reason that we are supporting Tata is because we want steel making to continue in the UK, and we think that South Wales has a really important place to play in the future of the UK steel industry.
Even if it takes quite a lot of job cuts?
Well, we will do everything we can, if that is the case, to support any individuals that are affected. But the jobs market in the UK is incredibly strong. We are one of the lowest unemployment rates in Europe.
Jeremy Hunt there speaking to our economics editor Ed Conway. Well, let's talk to Nick and Gina, shall we? And Nick, it's a depressing story, isn't it? All these job losses.
Oh, it's an absolutely horrific story. But I'm actually respectfully going to pass because I think, Gina, you made the most extraordinary point while we had a brief break there. You want to bring up the pounds and pence that are pieced here, which is something it's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary because back in September last year, the government basically wrote a cheque to Tata for 500 million to keep this going. And at the time, there were so many questions about why they were giving this state aid to a business that was unsustainable. But it was, how could they have given away that money or given that money to Tata without any questions, without any sort of scrutiny from Parliament? I don't understand how that could have happened. What promises did they get from Tata that the business was sustainable? And those people in that area, this is going to devastate that area completely. I just can't even begin to understand how they're going to survive.
So this is an area I know, Sophie. I've been to Port Talbot, and look, these are great folk, and they have a history and a tradition of doing this work. As you rightly say, it is going to, let's use the word, decimate the area. And I'm sorry, with respect to the Chancellor, we're going to do all we can to help these people. I'm sorry, that's not going to help them. This is not good enough. And again, we have given these people hundreds of millions of pounds. They've taken us for fools. It's simply not good enough. And the people who will pay are the most unfortunate individuals who are about to lose their job. I would sense are about to lose their jobs.
Yeah, and
shocking.
But what is so naive about Jeremy Hunt sitting in Davos there is that the fact I think what he says shows he doesn't understand businesses, because businesses are going to make business decisions based on profitability, workforce, where they can, and if they can move somewhere else where they can actually make a better product cheaper or in a country that they believe is more stable and has more to offer, they will move. This idea you can talk up Britain as they want to, that it's a great place to do business, is where we're going to have green technology. The business reality will always kick in.
I just want to bring you a statement that we've had in just in the last few moments. This is from the Welsh Economy Minister, Vaughan Gething, who said, "We're in discussion with Tata Steel UK and the recognised trade unions." And he goes on to say that we have approached the UK government regarding proposals concerning the future of the company's operation in Wales. This is not just an issue for Wales. Steel is a sovereign asset and should be treated as such by the UK government. So they're from Vaughan Gething, the Economy Minister in Wales. Thank you both very much. Coming up next on the Politics Hub. After the Post Office revelations, we investigate why thousands are being tracked down by HMRC and what some think could be the country's next big scandal. welcome back. Now, around 50,000 people are being hit with tax bills of potentially tens of thousands of pounds after a recent crackdown on so-called loan schemes. Now, these schemes work by paying people with tax-free loans, which are not expected to be repaid, rather than a conventional income. HMRC says it's never approved such schemes, but many affected workers maintain they had no idea that HMRC didn't believe the schemes worked. Gurpreet Narwin reports.
It's an almost existential threat. You know, you work hard for things like your home and your security, and when you don't know whether tomorrow you're going to get a letter that's going to take that away from you. After the late payment fees were applied, it was 24,000.
Michael, a healthcare worker, has fallen foul of the loan charge. He, like tens of thousands of people, were paid salaries through schemes that promised to take care of their taxes. But in 2017, the government introduced a new law allowing HMRC to demand tax from people whose employers did not, in fact, pay it.
Has emerged.
Lawyers say the loan charge was not fair from the start.
When the contractors were paid, the PAYE rules applied and were meant to ensure that tax was deducted from salary before it was received by the workers. That PAYE was not paid. The workers suffered a deduction, but that was just simply taken as fees by the promoters of the schemes, which were running rather dubious tax avoidance arrangements without the contractors' knowledge.
So why isn't HMRC going after the promoters of these schemes? It's a question that MPs have been asking.
What should happen is that the HMRC, if it thinks it's owed the money, should go back to the promoters, go back to the contractors who insisted on these terms and say, you can pay at least your share, if not the whole burden. But they're not doing that. And I'm afraid, in my view, they've made a massive ethical error in not doing so.
HMRC says it is responsible for collecting the tax that people owe, but that it has support in place to help people like Michael settle their bills.
HMRC is not out of pocket, the umbrella companies aren't out of pocket, the agencies that pushed it aren't out of pocket. It's only the end worker, and we're just normal people.
Michael is trying to move forward, but others have had their lives ripped apart. Marriages have broken down, and the loan charge has been linked to at least 10 suicides. Campaigners say now is the time for action. Gurpreet Narwin, Sky News.
Gurpreet reporting there. Well, we can get a bit more on the story and speak to Jai, who was asked to pay tens of thousands of pounds by HMRC. Thanks so much for being on the programme. It's really an astonishing story. Now, this all started when you were working, I think, as a freelance IT contractor. Is that right?
Correct, yes. Thank you for having me come on your show today. Yes, I was part of this, well, an umbrella company, we used to call it, in my early days. So I was pretty young, enthusiastic. I just wanted to get on with work and build my career. And one of the options was, well, the only options were when you're a freelancer is you either operate for an umbrella company or you work through a limited company. So for me, being a young guy, I don't know how to run a company. I don't know the ins and outs. You know, I just want to get on with work. You know, I've got bills to pay like everybody else. So you take the easy option, and that is working via an umbrella company.
Yeah, makes sense. You think it's all been sorted. You can just focus on what you do, your day job, right? I get that. What then happened?
So in 2017, I'd say, at least 2016, 2017, all of a sudden I get a letter saying you've been part of a tax avoidance scheme from the years of 2007 to 2010, which we are now investigating. So the first thing that comes to me is panic, to think, what, this doesn't sound right. I've paid all my taxes. I've always paid it on time. I've never been late. And I've made sure that everything I do is correct. Well, that's what I'm paying the umbrella company for. And it was just absolute panic, really, from that point onwards. And I'd be getting multiple letters from HMRC saying you've been part of it. Do you want to settle? Common sense is yes, so yes, I do want to settle. Please tell me how much I owe.
And how much did you owe?
So at the time it was 26,000. So yeah.
How much money were you earning at that time as well?
I was on the bottom end of my career ladder, so I was in the region of about 25,000, I suppose, before tax.
So they're basically asking you. They're saying that you need to pay your whole annual salary to them. I mean, that's scary.
Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much what it amounts to. Plus, you've got to remember they do add on interest as well, and they add on penalties, for paying late. So it does mount up. Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned quite a few things on your report there about the breakup of marriage. I mean, I'm glad, I haven't gotten that path, but in terms of obviously mental health, stress on the family, my health, obviously the anxiety that builds up, not just for me, but obviously for all the other consultants and contractors around the country that have also been hit, that also has impacted, and it still does, because I'm still in a limbo. I'm trying to settle, and I'm just going constantly in circles at the moment, trying to resolve it. I'm using accountants, which is obviously an extra cost to me. I'm using tax consultants, to advise me, and it's still ongoing. It's still frustrating because they won't speak to anybody that in terms of specialists that I'm trying to get them to speak to and agree a plan and try and close it. It's like, no, I only want to speak to Jay, but then they don't speak to me. So very frustrating and stressful times ahead still.
Sounds really stressful. As you say, unresolved. What's your message to any politicians tonight?
I think my message is we all understand tax and we all want to pay our tax. We're all professionals are law-abiding citizens as well as non-professionals. I think because this is historical, I think there just needs to be some common sense and some fairness and some compassion as well. We've had 10 suicides. That's not going to end. I'm sure that number will go up, and it's going to keep on going up, and lives will be tarnished unless some common sense and compassion is used to say, okay, fine, you've got this tax to owe. Let's come to an agreement and let's just get on with it and just close the cases for everybody, not just for me.
I'm really sorry that this has happened to you. It sounds unbelievably stressful, and my very best wishes to you in trying to get it all sorted out. Thanks for talking to us this evening.
No, thank you. Thank you for calling me in.
Right, let's get the thoughts of Nick and Gina, shall we? Poor guy. I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare.
Just shaking with anger. I mean, it's just, I have to say, so we're going back to 2017, and at the time, we all knew it was wrong. Everybody that spoke about this knew it was wrong. Every politician, APP, BJU, everyone knew that this was wrong, that you can't go after the individuals. They did nothing wrong. It was the agencies, the umbrella companies, that's the people they should have gone after. But, the money that's now they want to claw back, and they're bullying these people by saying, if you don't pay, we'll make you a bankruptcy, you'll put you into bankruptcy. They're adding on 45% interest to some of these loans. And they're saying, HMRC are saying to them, go out and get another loan to pay these loans. The level of inhumanity is just breathtaking to me, and just, you got to sort it out. It's a bit like the post office scandal. Why does the ordinary, hard-working person at the bottom have to, there's something culturally wrong in this country. Why is it not the institutions, the businesses, the big boys getting away with it who made all the money and the profit? And yet the hard-working, ordinary people are losing their lives over this.
And he's not earning a lot of money. That's the thing that gets me. Like 27,000,
As Gina just said, we know that ITV had a massive hit on its hands with Mr Bates versus the Post Office. I would suggest scriptwriters watching now on Sky News, you've probably got the next Mr Bates versus the Post Office list. But to Gina's broader point, it's almost like we're waking up in some horrific nightmare in which the state can unblinkingly take these decisions, because you rightly referenced the Post Office. We've now heard, there's the tainted blood scandal. It seems time after... Now, either, Sophie, it's a good thing that we now live in an age where all these stories can be revealed, which, we should celebrate that.
That's true.
Or, it is good, it is, but the other side is, dear God, how many others do we not know about waspy women? How many are there where these innocent folk are always the victims? It's really chilling.
You've got the excluded as well, the 3 million, who worked hard and paid their taxes, and apparently HMRC didn't have records of them. It's on and on and on. But, you know, when I say there's something culturally wrong here, it's also, if people can make mistakes, things can go wrong, you put your hand up, you say you got it wrong, and you fix it at the time.
It's the state's response.
But the state response of trying to bury everything means it ends up costing so much more and people's lives.
What gets me as well is, and again, quite reminiscent of the post office, this guy that, you know, we just spoke to there, Jai, was like, I keep calling them up and can't get through to anyone, no response. And that is so...
Well, you can't now because half of them are working from home. So it's anyway.
It is this horrible computer says no mentality that just seems the blanket drops down, and I just wish that gent and everyone else, you know, stick with it. Look at what Mr. Bates has achieved. Come on, let's get it together.
Actually, not often I agree with Sammy Wilson, but actually he's bringing this up in Parliament and David Davis, and, you know, their MPs are waking up. I think that what you'll find is the outing of the scandalous of what happened in the post office drama is now going to affect so many other things. And I think we're going to have a different lens on these scandals.
Well, hopefully. That
we hope. We hope.
Thank you both very much. Now, today saw public sector workers walk out in Northern Ireland's biggest strike in 50 years. More than 100,000 people took out to the streets, causing schools to close and grinding trains and buses to a complete halt. So what triggered the industrial action? Our Ireland correspondent Stephen Murphy can tell us more.
It was billed as the biggest strike day in Northern Irish history. Teachers, nurses, bus and rail workers and civil servants among the tens of thousands demanding fairer pay.
At the minute we are the lowest paid midwives in the UK and there's no reason why that should be the case.
Until we get equality, until we get fairness that everybody else is getting across the UK, I'll strike as long as I can.
At the showpiece rally at Belfast City Hall was Marie Irwin, a special needs teacher in Belfast. This is where she should be, in her classroom, preparing for her pupils.
We take this strike action under duress. It's not something I want to do. I don't want to go on strike. I want to be out working with my pupils who need their routine, who need me there, seeing them on any given day of the week. But I have to future-proof this profession.
What do we want? Pay parity! When do we want it? Now!
Pay parity is the central demand. Public sector pay here lags behind the rest of the UK. For example, a teacher's starting salary in Northern Ireland is £24,000 compared to £32,000 in Scotland. The situation has been exacerbated by the lack of a devolved government in Stormont for nearly 2 years. No ministers, no pay negotiations. Yesterday saw the 7th failed attempt to restore the executive. But there's anger too at the UK government.
We're here to embarrass Chris Heaton-Harris!
Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris says he can't release promised funding to deal with pay until Stormont returns, something widely dismissed by workers here.
Legislation can be changed to extend elections, so I don't see why it can be changed to give us our pay.
These workers are effectively angry at both governments, the one in London refusing to release the funds to solve the pay issue, and the one in Stormont that doesn't exist.
This strike has affected huge numbers of people, but so far seems to enjoy broad support. The unions have threatened escalation, saying they won't settle until a deal is done. Stephen Murphy, Sky News in Belfast.
Still to come on the Politics Hub.
Shadow Home Secretary who can't even get the name of the country right, talking about Kigali government, won't talk about Rwanda.
As the former Deputy Prime Minister denies making a geography howler, we'll look back at other times politicians didn't know their atlas from their elbow.
I joined the railway approximately 9 years ago now, and a part of my railway induction was to attend the Samaritans training course. Due to a safeguarding issue along the line. So I attended the Samaritans training course, and only 2 days later I was able to implement it in real life.
And part of what you do is talking and observing to passengers. And in a world where everybody's on their platform, on their mobile phones, waiting for trains, you're alert and looking. Yeah. What is it people should be looking out for?
I think the major signs are facial expression is probably the key one. Type of clothing people wear in line with the weather condition. If someone's isolating themselves in a specific area, missing constant trains. If you feel something's wrong, trust your instincts, and just build small talk. You know, you can anything random, nothing at that point you say is wrong. I tend to use the weather, a perfect example.
Just strike up a conversation.
Exactly, and this is about showing empathy. You know, doing it from the heart. Just be there for that vulnerable person.
Yeah, and Riz, as I said, you've saved 29 lives. Have you seen some of those people again?
There was one person who returned back a few weeks after the intervention, and she just ran over and gave me a big hug and said, if it wasn't for you that night, I wouldn't be here. And that was the only person who really came back. But it was so heartfelt, I was so emotional, and honestly, from that day onwards, I've prayed for her to be living her best life, and hope she is.
Anyone can sort of approach someone to find out if they're okay.
And that's the message. I feel like we're all born with the skills. We just got to dig deep and establish them skills and have the confidence to have that conversation. You could come across a total stranger, and that's someone's family member, and your actions can make a massive impact in their life.
Hello and welcome back to the Politics Hub. Now, the Conservative MP Therese Coffey has got into a bit of hot water over what seems to be quite the geographical gaffe. While attacking Labour over the party's stance on the government's Rwanda bill, the former Deputy Prime Minister seemed to think the name of the nation's capital city was a different country altogether. Let's have a listen.
I was somewhat astonished by the speech of the shadow Home Secretary, who can't even get the name of the country right, talking about the Kigali government. We're talking about Rwanda, you know, a respected country that has recently been president of the Commonwealth. In that regard, though, Mr. Speaker.
Well, she obviously got quite a lot of grief on social media for that, but triggering this response earlier today, some keyboard snipers moaning, she said, that I criticised the opposition for referring to the Kigali government, not the Rwandan government. I would not call the French government, the Paris government, nor the Scottish government the Edinburgh government. Why disrespect Rwanda? Well, it got us thinking. If she did make an honest mistake, she wouldn't have been the first.
So Belgium is a beautiful city.
Stop. A wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine.
They're our next door neighbors, and you can actually see Russia from land here in Alaska.
There's no Soviet domination of Eastern Europe, and there never will be under a Ford administration.
We need to get on with delivering the small modular nuclear reactors, which we produce here in Derbyshire.
Life expectancy in Africa has risen astonishingly as that country has entered the global economic system.
I hadn't quite understood the full extent of this, but if you look at the UK and you look at how we trade in goods, we're particularly reliant on the Dover-Calais crossing.
My wife was Japanese, my wife was Chinese.
Let's bring in Nick and Gina. That Jeremy Hunt one is tops it all.
It's mine, or it's a top one. It's just quite extraordinary. You can't remember. I wonder what his wife said when he got home about that.
Well, look, I'm here now in Westminster, in the county of Leicestershire, Northern Ireland, to say it's quite astonishing, isn't it, when you think of it, that they make these sort of... And, you know, Dr. Coffey, I think, swallow the medicine with the greatest of respect. And thank you, Sophie, for reading out the tweet. You got this wrong. Come on, we know that you got it, the Kigali around your neck. You should just take the medicine as it is.
She could have said, look, I'm so passionate about this, I mixed up my words, but then don't go back and try and explain it away. It's just extraordinary.
No matter how bad it is, Therese Coffey, you haven't got your partner's, country
wrong. I know.
It could have been worse.
Extraordinary. And when you recall at the last budget, do you remember he forgot to send her a birthday card or something like that? I mean, God bless Mrs. Hutt. She's prepared to put up with this. They're still together. We must celebrate that.
And also, you know what? I am someone who I'm not great at remembering geography. I get that. We're only human. But some of those gaffes.
Capital of Colombia.
No.
I'm not even going there.
The thing is,
not going there.
The thing is, I'm dyslexic and I say things wrong sometimes. Right. But you just put your hands up. You say, look, you got that wrong. It's just the lengths people go to then justify the fact that they say, just put your hands up and say, look, that was a mistake. I got it wrong. I meant whatever.
The great fear is that Dr. Coffey will be in charge of air traffic control. We actually get the first plane to leave Stansted, and we don't even know where it's going to land. She might not even get it to the right country.
And I guess the other thing is, do we really think that any MP would not know the name of Rwanda?
Well, it's such.
Come on. I feel like we've been talking about Rwanda for about 300 years.
But not only that, this is their flagship policy that they're pushing through. It just seems so careless or not to have got that right, not to have understood it. But and she was speaking with such passion about supporting this bill that she couldn't remember.
Yeah. Never mind. You're in good company. There you go. Thank you both very much. Really lively chat today. That is it from us this evening. I've had enough of these two now. But after this week, it does feel like we need a bit of light relief, a little bit of a breather. So thank you, Therese Coffey, for providing us with that. I will see you on Monday at 7 p.m. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee, with more on that story about HMRC.